One of the reasons I love travel is I love to learn. So when I'm home, I also still love to learn. It's easier to do it when you travel. When you're standing in front of the ticket machine in Prague and it's all in Czech and you don't speak a word of Czech, it's a puzzle. It's like going to an escape room, except that you really have to get on the train. For other people, it really is relaxation, and that's okay too.
I'm Michael Motometti, and you're listening to No Fixed Address, the world's most extraordinary people, presented by Matador Network. 2 years ago, I quit my job as a marketing executive and decided to travel the world with my wife.
Hi, I'm Vanessa.
And our baby daughter. We sold our home, our cars, packed a bunch of clothes into a small suitcase, and now live in a new country every single month. And something I've come to love about living on the road is the people I meet. So I decided to start a podcast. That way you can meet them too. The Mac Daddy, the OG, the GOAT of travel podcasts himself, Chris Christensen, is on the show today.
Yeah, wow.
This is exciting, man.
Since 2005, he's been a travel podcaster.
2005, I think he's got over 1,000 under his belt, if not more. This guy is the reason why we are sitting here today.
I didn't even listen to podcasts in 2005.
Listen to podcasts? I didn't even have a Facebook. I didn't even have a phone. I was listening to CDs, I think, in 2005. What? Point of the matter is, this guy has been around for a really long time, and his insight on travel is just phenomenal. And let me tell you the reason why. Not only because of his pedigree and how long he's been in the business, but what I enjoyed the most was the fact that me and him were so different.
I like that too, because he has a and I guess it's a very different way of traveling than we do.
Yeah, like we go for a month. I mean, we're like pretty avant-garde type travelers. He has figured out, I mean, again, his website is amateurtraveler.com, I believe.
Yeah, that's it.
He's basically cracked the code to figure out, like, if you have a normal job and you have a 9 to 5 and you have a family, what do you do and how do you get the most out of your travel?
Yeah, it's perfect. It's like a 1 or 2 week vacation a year. Here are some options. But the thing about him that I learned, or something that I learned through his conversation, is that he travels with other travelers. So his group of friends.
He's a traveler's traveler.
Yeah. Like he makes friends with other travelers, and that's part of his vacation. Whereas I feel like we try to make friends with the people that live in the places that we're going, with the locals, with this, with the bartender, with whoever. And we don't really make other traveler friends.
I know, it's kind of sad, to be honest. I mean, he did give me a whole new perspective again on cruises. I'm not a big cruise guy. Boom, had an answer for it. Told us exactly what kind of cruise would work for us, where to go, how to do it. I mean, this interview, this conversation is going to be amazing for so many people. Oh, and I'm never going to forget, I can't wait for you to hear about the quests.
Mm-hmm.
The travel quest on your little traveling journey. We're going to have a quest for you and me.
Why do you have to make it sound like Lord of the Rings?
I mean, that's the first thing that came to my mind when you started talking about quests. All jokes aside, I have started utilizing quests in my everyday life. You need to hear this.
I realize that I do quests without even knowing it.
Well, if you're questing already.
Yeah, but when you put a label on it, it kind of takes it to a new level. Like,
so we're going to quest together.
Do you want to go to all the coffee shops in Barcelona with me?
Okay, we're going to quest separately.
There we go. That sounds more like it.
Before we really get into it, we just hit top 19 travel podcasts on Apple. It would mean the world to us if you could subscribe, favorite, share our podcast, these episodes, anything you enjoy with your friends, your family, or if you're alone, just listen to this voice and go off to sleep at night. All right, let's get right into it. As you can tell, I'm excited about this conversation. I think it's going to be so helpful for so many people. Without further ado, Chris Christensen.
Chris Christensen is the host of the Amateur Traveler Travel Podcast. He's been a travel blogger and podcaster since 2005, all while juggling a successful career in tech. He's retired now, so I imagine he'll be traveling even more, but he's already been to over 70 countries, visited 158 UNESCO World Heritage Sites, which are sites recognized by the UN as being culturally or historically significant. And if you look at his bucket list on his blog, you'll see he's got a million more adventures planned. His blog is actually a great place to get ideas. He's a trusted voice in travel, having amassed millions of downloads. And today we're talking the biggest lessons in travel he's gleaned in the past 20 years. So get your notepad ready because you're in for a treat.
Just so you know, this episode is sponsored by Guide Geek. If you're booking a trip, check out Guide Geek, a new way to plan travel. It's an AI chatbot built on OpenAI, but what's cool is that it's actually curated by human travel experts at Matador Network, the world's largest independent travel publisher. I've been using it for a while now, mostly on WhatsApp, but you can use it on Instagram Messenger too. I often ask for advice on what neighborhoods to stay in when I'm booking accommodations, or you can get a little deeper and ask how Anthony Bourdain would enjoy a specific city. It's amazing. Head to guidegeek.com to try Guide Geek for free and start planning your next trip. That's guidegeek.com to start planning your next trip with your newest AI travel assistant. Chris Christensen, thank you so much for being on the show and taking the time. Talk to me about what it means to be an amateur traveler.
I chose amateur traveler because amateur means to do something for the love of it. Those of us who may remember that all the Olympic athletes used to be required to be amateurs. It wasn't that they weren't any good at it. They just didn't get paid for it. And so amateur, to do something for the love of it, is why I chose that.
What was your first trip/travel experience that made you fall in love with travel so much so that you wanted to start a podcast and a blog? I mean, that takes some dedication.
Yes.
Yeah, I want to hear about that trip that kind of got you hooked.
Probably if I had to single it down to a single trip, the first international trip I made was to Canada. In fact, by the time I graduated college, the only other country I'd been to was Canada. So wow. I'm not one of those people who grew up jet setting or anything like that. We couldn't afford it, honestly. But the first time I was in a foreign country was when the men landed on the moon. Literally, I watched the men walking on the moon on a little tiny television set in somebody's campsite that they had in their trailer. And there were a group of us lined up around this site watching this experience in Victoria, British Columbia.
That sounds insane and amazing.
When did you start international traveling?
It certainly made me love the national parks, love traveling, love a good road trip. Obviously, international travel didn't come till later, till I was out of college and could afford it. And then we did most of our international travel actually after my kids grew up and were old enough to appreciate it. And then obviously since then, I've done a little more travel.
So what inspired you to start the Amateur Traveler?
I started listening to podcasts relatively early and loved the format, still love the format. I listened to quite a few different podcasts throughout the week. And I decided I wanted to do my own podcast. We had some friends over for Memorial Day, and all the best stories were travel stories. Travel tends to get us out of our element, and it tends to be memorable, especially some of those international travel stories, but not just international. Sometimes it is the national park or the city that you've never been to. And so I said, that's it. I'm starting a podcast. It's going to be about travel. It's going to be about my travel stories, which it turns out was a really stupid idea because I was traveling 4 weeks a year. That's how much vacation I had. And I was podcasting 48 weeks a year. And you can see that math meant I was rapidly going through stories. I started inviting friends on to talk about their travels, and I really enjoyed that, hearing about destinations I hadn't been to. And basically, the number of friends has just grown over the years, and we're still having friends on or making new friends through people who are coming on the show and talking about cool destinations, both domestic as well as exotic or very exotic. Actually, the show that's coming up will be Afghanistan. So that will take most people out of their comfort travel bubble there.
What's the passion behind, addressing the amateur traveler, right? Because your podcasts, your content is not just specifically, you're going to Afghanistan. That's not the amateur traveler, right? So
it is not beginner travel. It's not like we recommend you should, first go to Reno and then go to Afghanistan. No, my show was really about the love of travel. And almost every episode we've done, there's one exception that I can think of, that we did a misadventure episode, misadventure travel in Siberia. But almost all those things have been somebody talking about someplace they went that they just truly loved. And maybe you will, or maybe you won't, but we're hoping that by the time that we've talked about it on the show, 45 minutes, an hour, somewhere in that range, that you'll know if this is a destination for you, or if it is like, no, not on your list.
It's interesting you say that, because for me, there's been many places I've been to that maybe I'm not like too keen on, but I've always loved it. Right. It's just, there's always been an experience. There's always been a story that I can come out saying, holy shit, do you remember when that happened? And I think those stories, to your point, can influence other people's opinions that might actually fall in love with a place. Like, oh man, I actually do want to really go experience that, Well,
and I think about the places that I love aren't always going to be the places that you love. Right. And there's nothing wrong with that. And the very first sponsored trip that I did was to Cozumel. To an all-inclusive resort. And all-inclusive resorts are really not my jam. I like to learn new things. So I want to be in a different, I want to see what's different about your city, what's different about your country. And so an all-inclusive, which is very, very comfortable, is not necessarily what I'm looking for. But I, thoroughly enjoyed the trip. And came back, and I was trying to figure out how to write it because I really want to get across what it is and what it isn't. And I want you to have a good, realistic expectation of what that is. So I wrote a blog post that was comparing that trip to Cozumel, Mexico, to a trip that I'd done to Mexico City. And Mexico City is a great deep dive into the culture of Mexico, but wasn't always comfortable. I came out of the hostel I was staying at, and there were riot police there one day.
It's come a long way, for sure.
There was quite a contrast between the two. And in Cozumel, for instance, as I was flying in, somebody was coming in who was sitting next to me, and he was going to go be purchasing some land there. And he said, it's such a safe place. He had a friend who went to get a rental car in Cozumel, and they said, yeah, it's over on 5th Street. The keys are in it. And, he got in a car and drove it around all week and returned it. And when he went to return it, said, yeah, you actually got in the wrong car, but, it's an island. We figured, where's it going to go? And you were going to return it, so we didn't worry about it. And so I wrote that blog post that compared those two experiences. And as I read that blog post, I think, well, I would choose to go to Mexico City. And I had a coworker who was a single mom who had a young daughter, and she read that and said, I never really thought about going to Cozumel until I read your post, and now I'm interested. And
that compare and contrast goes a long way. Yeah,
I've done my job. I've helped you use your vacation time well and pick out a destination that is worth your time.
So let's talk about something that I did. I was going through your page, which is really helpful for anybody who needs to understand anything about travel, whether you're an amateur or someone like me who's traveling full time for 3 years. A lot of helpful stuff on there. But there was a section on Travel 101, I believe is the section, and on cruises. And I cannot stand cruises. Okay. Just the idea of me waking up in that massive shopping mall every single day. Talk to me about cruises.
You don't understand that cruises are more broad than you're thinking. So
that's what I want to hear.
There is the big shopping mall with 5,000 passengers on there that literally is like an indoor mall or staying at an amusement park. And that may not be for you. It is, traveling in a small city, and it is more about the ship than the destination in a lot of those cruises. Because when you get off, you're going to be getting off with 5,000 people. So
and 12 hours in and out, like that's you're anxiety promoting.
But on the other hand, I did a cruise to Alaska. I want you to picture when I said I just did a cruise to Alaska. What are you picturing?
I am picturing like a very large cruise, and then all of a sudden somebody goes on and says, hey, the buffet is ready. Oh, and then check out, there's also an iceberg over there. Okay.
Probably not an iceberg, possibly a whale. It's definitely the midnight buffet and all the chocolate and things like that, which is pretty cool if you like that scene. That is not the cruise I did. I did a cruise with Uncruise, and there were 100 people.
What's it called?
Uncruise.
Okay.
It's an expedition class ship. So there's a number of different sizes for ships, first of all. And an expedition class ship tends to be a lot smaller, maybe as big as 300 or 500, but usually around 100. So 100 different people on this ship. We left Juneau, Alaska. We did not stop at any other port for a week. We parked in little tiny bays and inlets. We parked at the end of the Endicott Glacier and watched the ice calf. We got in Zodiacs. We kayaked. We bushwhacked, where we literally were up in Glacier Bay National Park making our own trails in the places where the glacier had
This is
receded.
like my jam.
Yeah,
this is my jam.
There is a cruise for, I don't know, for everybody, but I mean, there's a great variety. And there are things in between as well. For instance, I went to talk to the Virgin Cruise Line at one of the shows, and I was said, I read about your thing, and you've got the tattoo parlor, and you're, youth forward and things like that. But what do you do about destinations? What's your best destination you go to? And they said, well, we go to like Ibiza, and we stay there overnight, so you can party all night. So that's a different cruise line, right? That's all about the party. And I said, well, what if I'm interested in more UNESCO World Heritage sites and culture and things like that? They literally said, yeah, go talk to Viking. There isn't just one cruise, template.
So just like everything else in life, research goes a long way.
Right. It just depends on what you're looking for. There is a range.
Everyone speaks about travel as a vacation, right? It's like, oh, I got this week off and I had this really great time. But do you think that there's some underlying things that are happening if you travel more that can bring some long-term happiness and not just some short-term? Or do you find that just spurts of happiness when because for me, people like me and you, we travel so much, we talk about it every day, it's our passion. But what about the normal person?
For me, for instance, I love to learn new things. One of the reasons I love travel is I love to learn. So when I'm home, I also still love to learn. It's easier to do it when you travel. When you're standing in front of the ticket machine in Prague and it's all in Czech and you don't speak a word of Czech, it's a puzzle. It's it's like going to an escape room, except that you really have to get on the train. But for other people, it really is relaxation, and that's okay too. I had a boss who could not relax in his normal life and could relax in Hawaii for whatever reason, and so he needed to go to Hawaii. And I worked in startup companies for more than 20 years in my career. And I remember one of the companies I was in, if I hadn't traveled in a while, if I hadn't gotten away from the job, and theoretically that could have just been an all-inclusive beach vacation or something like that. It's just that I would get restless after 3 hours. But, if I hadn't traveled, I would literally get a tick in my right eye that would just start to twitch. It's like, okay, I am building up stress here and I need to go relieve that. And for me, travel is a good way to do that. Obviously, if you're not traveling all the time, or if travel is not your jam, you need to figure out what your ways of relaxing, how you deal with life in general. But for me, travel is a great way to do that.
It's interesting that you say that about individuals finding what lets them release or feel relaxed, and that travel can be that for a lot of individuals. And for me, I think travel even goes a step further, man. Like, I obviously share so many of my experiences on my TikTok and my Instagram channels, and they're real experiences, right?
Right.
And I always remember this Mark Twain quote. It's like, travel is fatal to prejudice, bigotry, narrow-mindedness, and many of people need it sorely on these accounts. Right? Broad, wholesome, charitable views of men and things cannot be acquired by vegetating in one little corner of the earth all of one's lifetime. And so it's like, that's like my underlying goal with the stuff that I share, because I want to get people out there. I've experienced racism in my life, right? Being a first generation American Iranian, right? And it's just like the more you get to know people, the more you get to interact with people that are different from you all around the world, the more you realize how similar we all are.
Well, and I'm a, pasty white guy. So living, not coming from riches or anything like that, but still having pasty white guy privileges. So I don't have that sort of experience that you have. But on the other hand, as someone who loves to learn and is a huge history buff, just, the people who really made a difference in history are my heroes. For me, going to Montgomery, Alabama or whatever, and, learning about Rosa Parks in the Rosa Parks Museum, or going to the National Civil Rights Museum, which I think is the best museum in the United States, and there's a lot of really good contenders there. But have you been to Memphis to the Civil Rights Museum?
I have not been to Memphis. No.
So the National Civil Rights Museum is obviously a really impactful story, because it's the story of all the things that happened in civil rights, not just in Memphis. It's an amazing story of courage in the U.S., and it should be told.
There is something so special about that. We have a friend too that just travels to see war sites, and people forget that you can tailor the experience to your interest specifically.
Oh yeah. I think it's great for everybody. I like the idea of having a quest. So, whether it's, to see the most countries or to see more UNESCO sites, I have a list of both the countries I've been to and the UNESCO sites I've been to. I assume your audience probably knows what a UNESCO World Heritage Site is, but basically these are sites that the UN declared these should be saved for all mankind. These are amazing sites. But I also have a list of, I want to get to all the ballparks in the U.S. and I want to get to all of the battlefields that were fought between the Army of the Potomac and the Army of Northern Virginia as a history buff in the Virginia, Maryland, Pennsylvania area.
But you know what? You just sparked an idea for me. I think you have these grander quests, but I think really cool travel tips should be maybe some micro quests at each destination quests. Like once you pick where you want to go for your destination or for your vacation, why not set up these mini quests for you and your family?
For my daughter on their honeymoon in Puerto Rico, I think it was find the best mofongo, and that's that's a great quest too.
Yeah, that's so cool.
They didn't know they were mofongo fans until they went to Puerto Rico, and then they kept searching for even better mofongo. So
I think we've already got some awesome tips from you. Obviously, I really like this quest one, by the way. I have another month and a half in Barcelona. I'm going to set a quest for myself. Okay.
But all the Gavi sites would be mine. See, in
oh my God. Yeah. But tips. Like everyone always talking about tips. That's the stuff that's going viral. I would love to hear any travel tips that just come to mind that are maybe your top 3. I mean, some of the stuff that are very simple for me. Like I found out while I was in Japan that I could easily ship my luggage from my hotel or my Airbnb to another city. And I don't have to, I can take a train from one city to another city, from Tokyo to Kyoto with a lot more ease, right? Another really cool tip we thought about the other day was we were sitting across from each other. We weren't next to each other, me and my wife, in the plane, and there was no internet. It was one of these smaller planes. And we actually started typing on notes, screenshotting, and then airdropping the image to each other so we would communicate from afar. What about you? Tell us some cool, funny tips or just some stuff that just you have to tell people.
One of the tips that I'm running into right now, so we're all taking photos on our phones now, which is a great tip. You use the camera that you have, but in the hot weather, you'll find you're going through your battery life faster.
I did not know that.
Yeah. And once it gets above 90 degrees or so, you start to degrade the battery in the phone. Even if you're in real hot and humid weather, you might find your phone tells you it needs to shut off, which I ran into because I was just in D.C. and then in Puerto Rico and then in St. Augustine, Florida, all very warm destinations. But a couple things you can do. One is make sure, especially if you've got an iPhone, but you can do the same thing on Android, put yourself in airplane mode as often as you can. So if you're not planning on, if everybody at home is, 9 hours away, you don't necessarily need to leave it on all the time. If you did, hear from them, it's not like you can immediately hop on a plane and do something anyway. So that will save a lot of battery life. Also go in and change all of your apps that have location preferences and turn off all the ones that don't need it, or turn it to only using the app, because that'll save battery life. And also turn off as many background processes as you can for the apps that don't need it. And then you can also just first thing in the morning, get up and turn on low power mode. Basically say, yeah, I've got 100% battery, but go into low power mode and it'll keep your battery life for the whole day.
Have you guys ever tackled on your show? I know you said mostly it's positive, right? But
mostly, except for one episode on misadventure travel in Siberia.
Has anybody ever spoken to, the only reason I'm bringing this up is because we're in Barcelona, we're living and breathing it right now, is anti-tourism. I mean, do you have any thoughts on that? I mean, I had this interesting email come out to me. It was somebody from a large publication, and they just did a post on this, actually. They wanted my thoughts on the anti-tourism protests that are going on in Barcelona. And I gave them this really awesome answer. It was 3 sections. It was very balanced. You know what I mean? And I got a snap reply, and it said, "Oh, sorry, we're looking for someone who's very uncomfortable with the protests, so we're not going to be able to use this." For me, I haven't really felt a lot of anti-tourism in my life over the last 3 years, and we've been everywhere, right? We hear about it here and there, but we don't really experience it. Most people, welcome tourists for the most part. I mean, do you have any thoughts on it at all?
Well, it was interesting coming out of the pandemic. There were definitely places that put some laws in place to limit some of the tourism because they had enjoyed that break that they'd received. And, one of the things we see rules in terms of cruise ships, for instance, and some of those are anti-pollution. Like, you can only come here now if you plug in your cruise ship. You can't be firing up your diesel generators. And when we were in South Carolina, that was a big protest that was going on there. Is you're basically running this power plant, which is what a cruise ship is. It's a power plant. It's also a sewage disposal, waste treatment plant and floating hotel and all those things. And they were protesting that they were polluting, basically, with their air pollution from that. And then you'll run into places like Barcelona. A lot of it is around the Airbnbs. It's basically people taking out the Airbnbs out of the rental market.
Cost of living.
That I completely understand that. But, I understand the issue in terms of what people are doing. And often what they're doing there is they're saying, well, you can only do that if you do a long-term stay. If you're helping solve the rental market rather than competing with the hotels. It's reasonable, and people are making whatever rules they want to in terms of those sort of things that are issues that are being impacted by tourism. In terms of, have I always felt welcome as a tourist? No, probably not. Some places are definitely more welcoming than others. Some places are a little more tired of tourists than others. Yeah. But on the other hand, our dentist, who I was just at yesterday, is going back to Maui. And he said he last went, and they stay in Kihei. And I don't know if you know the island, but we had the great big fire in Lahaina, which is the western part of the island. And Kihei is in the shore of the eastern part of the island. He said they went after the governor told people to stop coming to Maui. They actually continued to go because they knew they weren't anywhere near, what was going on in the rebuilding. And they had 30 people in their flight and 3 people in the rental car agency with nobody there. And the guy saying, yeah, we're going to get fired or laid off because there's not enough business. Wow. And the people in Kihei saying, we wish the governor hadn't said that because our business is, so tourist driven. And we're suffering because they told people to stop coming, and really they should have just told them to stop coming there.
It's a strange balance because not only in tourism dollars, but also just a plain old fact, let's be honest here, tourism is not going to stop. People want to see these beautiful cities and experience and travel.
Tourism may go elsewhere, though. But Barcelona may, they may have cut off their nose to spite their face. There are going to be people who don't want to go to Barcelona now because they are being told they are unwelcome. Okay, but is that really what you want? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Certainly some people there are going to be hurt by it. So we didn't travel until we got our vaccines. Fortunately, because my wife is in healthcare, we got our vaccines relatively early. And I put it out there that I'm ready to go on trips and, sent out to some agencies that I've worked with before or not. And went on a cruise. One of the first things we did is we went on a small boat cruise, about 300 passenger cruise with Windstar. And we were the first ship heading into some of these cruise ports in the Caribbean where 90% of their revenue comes in through tourism. And literally there were fireboats going in beside our ships, going with their water cannons. The governor was there to greet us and giving speeches. There was a steel drum band, and it was a big deal. We were followed around by a television crew all day as we went on our shore excursions. And, we weren't really bringing that much money in, that we weren't a big ship, but for them it was hope. It was we had a couple different tour guides. This was the first time they had worked in 2 years.
Wow.
So, it's a lot of money in tourism.
I know. That's what I was saying that in my response. I'm like, listen, not only is it about regulation, but there has to be some acceptance, right? I mean, I know it sounds idealistic, but there has to be some sort of balance. Another thing what's interesting, I keep hearing you speak about a lot of the places you've been, but I've heard a couple of times repeat places. And I don't know, like I was talking to my friend the other day and he was like, I have this mission to see, one of his quests is to see all the countries in the world or visit all the countries in the world. And I think he's like 80 away. It's pretty impressive. He's like, the only thing that's getting in my way right now is Japan. I said, what do you mean? He's like, I just love it so much. I have to go back every chance that I get. And for me, I'm at that place where it's like almost like a movie. I don't want to watch it again if I've seen it, right? I want to just try to see as many places as I possibly can. What about you?
I'm more like you. On the other hand, I was just back in Puerto Rico because the TBEX, the Travel Blog Exchange Conference, was in Puerto Rico. And I was there for a week last year, but I love Puerto Rico. And so, the opportunity to go back is not a burden. But this year so far, I have no plans to get to a new country, and it kind of grates me. So, I'm getting back to Istanbul, which I haven't been back to in years. And while I'm back at the Society of American Travel Writers Conference in Istanbul afterwards, I figure I'm too close to countries I haven't been to. I've got to get to at least one.
You could do it.
See, my goal is by the time I die that I have been to more countries than I have years of age.
Ooh,
wow.
That's a quest. If you're enjoying No Fixed Address, the world's most extraordinary people, we know you'll enjoy Travel That Matters. This season, Travel That Matters is interviewing master chefs like Wolfgang Puck and Danny Meyer, the founder of Shake Shack. Wolfgang Puck talks about his culinary adventures, including the time he was presented with 120 pounds of camel meat, and delves into how his love for travel has shaped his innovative approach to blending local ingredients with international flavors. Danny Meyer explains how childhood travel experiences shaped his restaurant empire and explores the power of family travel, the culinary scene in New York City, and innovative trends in food. Step into the exclusive world of luxury travel on the podcast Travel That Matters and open the doors to top food, adventure, and experiences. Find Travel That Matters wherever you listen to podcasts. Tell me about some experiences that you had. You must have had so many people have just called you over the years or emailed you over the years. It happens to me all the time, but for you, it must be, oh my God, I can't imagine. There's like, oh, because of you, I'm gone here, or because of you, I've done this.
Those are my favorite emails. Is I never thought about going to fill in the blank, and now we're writing you from our honeymoon in Namibia, for instance, was one that I remember seeing. So those are very
it's so
cool.
Great to feel that, right?
Yeah. And sometimes that person is me, right? We had the person on the show, talking about going down to the Yucatan, and I'd never been to the Yucatan. So sometimes the person who is, heard about the destination first on the show and thoroughly enjoyed going there is me.
I'd love to know, what are some underrated destinations out there for people to go to nowadays? Like, what's out there that people aren't talking about?
Most beautiful city in Europe, in my opinion, Luxembourg City.
Okay, writing it down.
A lot of people don't get there. Whoever says, let's go to Luxembourg, but it's this city built on these crags with gorges around it. It was a fortress city. You can still go into the caissons of Luxembourg City. Very beautiful city. More people should get there.
I had the similar feeling in Ljubljana, Slovenia. I loved
So I
it
saw
over there.
Ljubljana on a rainy day, so I thought I enjoyed it, but I didn't quite enjoy it. But Slovenia in general, I think you're right.
Beautiful. Oh my God.
How about the Skocin Caves? Did you get to the Skocin Caves?
We did. Yeah.
And that's the one that's the UNESCO World Heritage
Yes.
Cave.
Yes, it is.
So first I'd done the other cave where you take the train into the mountain for a kilometer or whatever. And I thought that was, stunning. And then we kind of came in the back door of the Skocin Cave and I thought, this is UNESCO. This is not that impressive, whatever. This is nice. And then we came to that part where you're at an underground river with the mist rising up from the chasm. And it's like, oh my gosh. I'm in Lord of the Rings here, waiting for the Balrog to come as we're crossing over the bridge. It was just stunning.
I recommend everyone going to Slovenia. And again, it's one of those countries. It's one of those countries that no one says, hey, let's go to Slovenia. But I was truffle hunting. I was foraging. I was at like Michelin star restaurants. It was insane.
It is a great country. Then you go to like Czechia or Czech Republic. Everybody goes to Prague. Prague is amazing. It's beautiful. Don't go in there in summer, but one of the places and there are other places in Prague that are also beautiful, like Český Krumlov, for instance, gorgeous, gorgeous city, even prettier than Prague. But one of the places that I really enjoyed, and I only went because there was a conference there, was Ostrava. Ostrava is the other end of the country. It's in the eastern end of the country. And it used to be their version of Pittsburgh, very industrial city with coal mines and steel plants and things like that. The city still has all these pipes from this infrastructure that go through town. It looks like a giant hamster habit trail, human size. Metal pipes going through town. You can go to a coal mine and tour the coal mine and see all the things laid out, like the guys are ready to go down in there. You can't go into the coal mine there, but you can learn about the process of this. Fascinating city. I love cities like that I'd never heard of.
So cool.
That's so cool.
So cool. Yeah. At the end of our little conversation over here, we always love to have a speed round. Some of the answers that we hear are very 50-50 across the board, no matter where you live or who you are. It's very interesting. This one definitely differs for all, but if you could live anywhere in the world, where would it be and why?
Well, I can, and I live here. So I guess that says something. I really do enjoy where I live. I live in the Bay Area, California. One is I can afford to live here because I moved here before it got ridiculously expensive. But I wake up and think, another day in paradise.
Second question, what are you most scared of?
I don't know that I have any huge fears. I mean, I'm afraid of snakes and sharks and, all of the usual suspects.
What is your biggest regret, if any?
I try not to live with regret. And so that has been helpful. I've worked my way down the corporate ladder, for instance, in various times because I wanted more freedom to travel. And so I try to live without regrets. I don't know that I have any big ones right now.
And lastly, what makes you happiest?
Right now, I got two grandsons that are way up there.
How old?
Well, one is only 3 months old and one is 23 months old. And especially the 23-month-old one is pretty much a hoot. And I suspect that that's going to be the answer for some years to come is what makes me happy is being with them or being with my family. If it's not that, it's someplace new, someplace that I haven't been, someplace with history. The most recent solo trip I did was Malta, and just, thoroughly enjoyed being in megalithic tombs and in castles. And, you start speaking my love language at that point. So
I love that. And Chris, this has been a fantastic conversation. I really appreciate, like I said, taking the time, and I enjoyed it thoroughly. Not only did I learn a lot, but I also enjoyed your charisma and your laughter, and your take on life and philosophy on life is amazing, man. I don't want you to take that for granted. Not to take it with who am I to tell you anything, but I just, as a new friend, as a new follower, as a new listener, you definitely put a smile on my face. So thank you very much for that.
You are welcome.
How can our listeners learn more about you and your work? Where can we find you?
amateurtraveler.com. All the socials are linked from there. And then obviously Amateur Traveler Podcast, wherever fine podcasts are found.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Chris Christensen as much as I did. Thank you for listening. As usual, No Fixed Address, the world's most extraordinary people, is presented by Matador Network.
Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. We release new episodes every other Thursday.